Awesome. Thank you so much, Leanne Townsend, for joining me today on the expert series of talks. And I just want to let everyone know that I met Leanne, I don't know, what's it been, 2 years ago now?
Yeah, at least it was a while ago.
It seems like a while ago, but Leanne's been doing some amazing work in Toronto, of course, in Canada. But you know, the expertise that she has to offer is really worldwide, because divorce is divorce is divorce, and the way we go about it and how we proceed is really key. So Leanne is here to talk to us all about the processes of divorce, what you should be looking for, and what you should be, asking, what questions you should be asking, and so forth. So just to give you a little brief on what Leanne is doing and what she's all about, she's a family law attorney and a divorce strategist here in Toronto. She's a partner at the law firm Brauti Thorning, where her practice is focused, of course, on family law, domestic violence, and victim advocacy, which I think is so important. And of course, she's regularly interviewed in the media and has been featured in Lawyers Daily, Divorce Magazine, as well as other publications. She's been a guest speaker on numerous radio stations and podcasts, and of course, talking about all kinds of related topics such as abusive relationships, divorcing, a narcissist, which is really hot in my group right now, co-parenting, and other family law topics. In addition, she's spoken at various events around women empowerment, and regularly writes her blog. And of course, she has her own podcast called Divorcing Well, which is absolutely spectacular. Welcome, Leanne. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. And I was thinking I should have you on the podcast, so we'll have to chat about that after.
I would be honored. So as I was mentioning before, when we are breaking up from a long-term divorce, there's so many resources out there, and there's so many lawyers out there. I know my journey, I went through 4 lawyers before I found the one that actually represented me properly. And I want to be able to, give the tools to anyone who's watching right now to understand what you should be looking for and what you should be asking. Like there's key questions to ask before you even hire a lawyer, or when you're looking for a lawyer. Could you kind of help us figure out what kind of questions we should be asking lawyers when we go for interviews or whenever we're searching?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, first of all, it's important, I think, to speak to more than one lawyer and to do some research. I mean, a lot of people, they get panicked when they, either they get served with, say, court documents, which have a deadline to respond to, or their spouse leaves, and, the stress is overwhelming. So the first thing they do is they just ask everyone they know, do you know a family law lawyer? And, third cousin Billy recommends somebody, and that's who they go with. And that's really, it's a very important decision, who you decide to work with. So it shouldn't be something you just jump into in a panic. One of the things I always tell people, a lot of people are intimidated by lawyers, and as a lawyer myself, I find I don't understand. I think, God, why would someone be intimidated by me? I can't even imagine. But it is a reality that some people are, and so they're afraid to to ask questions, and they're afraid to put the lawyer kind of on the spot or have the lawyer prove themselves. And I always say, that's nonsense. You're the client, and at the end of the day, in any family law matter, you're going to end up probably having to pay that lawyer a fair amount of money, on some level, whatever you end up doing. And they should be appreciating your business. So you should be the one in the driver's seat and feel comfortable asking questions. So, I mean, referrals are always the ideal way to find someone. So, I mean, I know I kind of poked fun at, getting a lawyer from third cousin Billy, but at the end of the day, if you know someone who has used a particular lawyer and had a good result, that's always a good place to start. But I think it's important that when somebody books a consultation or speaks to a lawyer on the phone, that they look for someone who they think is going to be a good fit. And that fit comprises, I think, 2 key areas. So one is a good fit for them personally. And when I say that, you know, some of my clients need a lot of hand holding. They have you know, what I would classify maybe as a needy personality. They're very anxious and they need a lawyer who is going to be very patient with that, and, you know, and who's approachable and friendly, and who, you know, is able to do that. Because not like, just like all people, same with lawyers, like some lawyers have they're better at that. They're better at the hand holding than others are. So if you think you have a personality where you're going to need more of that, then you need to make sure you find a lawyer who you have that comfort level with. If you don't care about that, you know, because some people don't, then that's not as important. The other thing is just for your particular case. So, you know, when you go into the family law sphere, so to speak, you know, you could be somebody who's just negotiating a separation agreement. It could be just a parenting plan, or you could be in all out, you know, litigation with a narcissist. You know, there's varying levels of hostility. There's varying issues. You could be in a power imbalance. You could be in an abusive relationship, you know, all these types of factors. And so you need to pick a lawyer who is also a good fit for that, because not all lawyers will go to court, first of all. Some lawyers don't, you know, they don't practice that they go to court. Some lawyers are like myself. I do I will do resolution. I always think that's the best option, to try and resolve and get a settlement and just draft a separation agreement. But if need be, I have no issue going to court and fighting in court, you know, as appropriate for my client. So that's one issue, because if you think it's possibly going to end up in court, you don't want to hire a lawyer who won't go to court, and then you have to change lawyers down the road because that lawyer won't go to court. But there's also, you know, some lawyers are, you know, in my view, like they're pit bulls, and they are great in court, but then they're not going to be resolution oriented as much. They're going to throw the grenade right at the beginning, and that may not be appropriate for a client either. So, you know, it really depends on, you know, your own case, how hostile it is, you know, whether it's in court, whether it's not in court, and what sort of approach is best. And you need to pick your lawyer who will fit with that approach as well.
You've said so much in there. I just like writing notes. Okay, first of all, second cousin Billy. Okay, I did that 3 times out of my 4 lawyers, honest to goodness. And I think I interviewed probably 8 lawyers.
Wow.
To be completely honest, because it took me a long time. It took me a while to figure out exactly what I needed, because I was being told one thing, oh yeah, we're going to mediate, we're going to agree, but they weren't agreeing, and they were constantly trying to create conflict on the other side. So I was, you know, I was sort of bewildered at, well, are we going to go into mediation? Are we really going to do that? Or is this just some sort of ruse to like create more conflict? And I couldn't find the lawyer who could just break through all the bullshit and say, no way, this is the end of this. We're going to, you know, it was quite a process. And I really don't want women to have to go through what I did. I mean, that's why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. I think it's really super important, yes, to know what kind of, exactly what you said, what you need. And honestly, I knew from the beginning it was going to be a conflict, and I knew we were probably going to court. But I was told, no, we can mediate. Oh yeah, this is doable. So you've got to be clear, and you've got to trust your gut. So thank you for that. That's absolutely the best way to do it. You know your husband, you know your ex pretty well, right? You know whether or not they're going to be in conflict with you or not, because you've had a marriage that way. So, and I love the fact that you've got personal experience with a narcissist. So that is key. And it's beautiful that you're able to, you know, in your practice, offer anything that is required, because I found there were some lawyers that I had that were really great at the beginning, you know, back and forth. But when it came down to, oh, you know, it's time to go to court, or maybe go to court, they just said, no, I can't do that. I'm like, why didn't you tell me that at the beginning?
Yeah.
Right?
No, it's a problem. And like, it's funny because there's something called collaborative law, which sounds lovely, because, you know, it's the idea of not being so hostile and trying to collaborate to a solution. But, you have to sign an agreement at the beginning saying you won't go to court. So if it doesn't, resolve, then you have, you're going to have to go and start over. And so that's my problem a little bit with some of those approaches. I'm not pushing court. I do think it's, you really don't want to end up there, but I think it's always better to have a lawyer that at least that is an option, because sometimes people need the threat of court to do what they need to do, like when you don't have a hammer on certain personalities that you can wield, they won't do what they need to do.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so now you're in with the whole lawyer thing, so you understand this. So so tell me, because if I had been a little more aware about the conversations I had in my interviews, I think, I might have saved a few hundreds of thousands of whatever I paid. I don't even know how much it was in the end. So what do you, are there any red flags that we should be really consciously aware of when we're speaking to lawyers or interviewing lawyers? What do you think?
I think you want to feel like a red flag would be if you don't feel comfortable communicating with them. I think that's, really important. If they're arrogant or seem, distracted, or if they seem like, they're telling, like a lawyer has expertise. So on some level, they need to tell you, share their expertise, but at the end of the day, you're the client and they need to act on your instructions. So you don't want someone who's, a bully in some way. I think a red flag is just if their personality is, if you already feel intimidated, that's probably not a good person to hire, because you are going to need to have good communication. A red flag would be if, I do think somebody should always search their name up in the Law Society directory and make sure they haven't been disciplined. Because, to me, that's a flag if your lawyer's got a discipline history with the Law Society, because it's all there. It's public record. If any lawyer who's been this is in Ontario, I'm assuming there's probably similar things around the world, but, you want to make sure that they haven't run an unethical practice. So that would obviously be a flag. And, just how professional are they? Like, things have become a little more casual since COVID with, people working from home and, that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, I feel a lawyer is a professional. And so if, when you meet with them or speak with them, they don't seem like they're very professional, I think that would be a flag. And you want to talk about fees and all of that, but you can't really tell. There's some lawyers who are great whose fees are low, and there's some lawyers who are great whose fees are high, and there's bad lawyers at all levels too. So, that's why it's good to kind of ask around if you know anyone who knows that lawyer or has had experience with them.
Yeah, that's great advice. So now, as you were speaking, I remembered exactly this one red flag. So I thought I had a great lawyer at the beginning, little family law, highly recommended by a couple of friends actually, close to where I was living. And things were fine going back and forth. And I started to notice that I wasn't getting a monthly bill from them. Would you say that's a red flag?
Yeah, that's a red flag, because then you could end up with a really large bill, after 3 months or something. Like you want to get, and that's a challenge, because I know I was I practiced on my own for a little while before I joined the firm I'm at. And so when I was on my own, and you have all of that admin on top of your practicing, of law and managing clients, like it's easier to run into that type of situation, which isn't great for the clients. So, that I would say that that's a flag, because as they say, the last thing you want is to get a bill for 3 months of work. That's a large bill versus having it broken down into, monthly invoices. So yeah, I would agree that's a flag.
Yeah. Thank you. Eventually that lawyer, actually, you have to pay a retainer, obviously, but I didn't get a monthly statement showing me where I was. And after about, 4 months, my girlfriend, who was also using her at the same time, just stopped having all communication from her, and we found out they were being disbarred.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, because that's like a whole, the other thing when you were just speaking that popped into my mind, like, you know, when you pay money in trust, like there's very, very strict rules about how the lawyer is to treat that money. And, you know, it's not their money until they've done the billing. So that money is to be, if, you know, if a lawyer hasn't sent you a bill, then that money is supposed to still be in the trust account because they're not allowed to, even if they've done the work, if they haven't billed, they're not supposed to switch it over into their, you know, their operating or their business account to pay themselves. So that's definitely like, that's awful that you had to experience that.
Yeah, yeah. I know. I wish I had you around back then. um, so, okay, those are great red flags. So now we've hired our lawyer. We're happy with the way things are going, but we're not sure what to do. Mediation, collaborative, versus just going straight to court. Can you give us just a little bit of, you know, definition as to what are the differences and what are the benefits, advantages and disadvantages?
So mediation involves hiring an independent third party who is a mediator who will help the parties try and come to some sort of agreement on the issues. And some mediators are lawyers, some are, you know, social workers, some are, they come from a variety of backgrounds. And so if you do choose to use a mediator, you want to make sure if you're looking for something that's more like a parenting plan, you want to look for a mediator who perhaps has more of that social work background or child development. If you're looking for a mediator for financial stuff, you're going to want to make sure that maybe they have an accounting background or maybe they're a lawyer. Or, you know, it's important that you have someone who's the right fit that way. But a mediator is not an advocate. So if you go to mediation, the mediator's job is to be neutral and they're not going to advocate for one side or the other. So if there's any sort of power imbalance, it can be a problem, although that can also be addressed because there's lawyer assisted mediation. Like I've been involved as a lawyer in mediations where I go with my client and I'm there with them throughout the mediation and can protect from any sort of power imbalance. So that's always an option. And then there's also the option that you go to mediation on your own with your spouse, but you consult your lawyer, you know, at various stages before agreeing to anything, and that can happen as well. One of the benefits of mediation is it can sometimes be less expensive depending. Some mediators' fees are the same as lawyers' fees, but some of them are less. And it can be a less expensive option if it works. If it doesn't work and your partner is the type who's never going to agree to stuff, you could find yourself wasting a lot of time and money involved in that process, only to end up with nothing. So you want to make sure that you feel your partner is somebody who would be committed to coming to some sort of agreement, because I do think mediation is a great option for, you know, people who aren't in a high conflict type of situation and where there hasn't been abuse, because it is more affordable and it can be faster. Mm-hmm. Collaborative law, I touched on a little bit earlier. It's where you use lawyers and often other experts, like there'll be an accountant and, you know, a financial advisor, I guess, and insurance, or, you know, just different experts, and each side has their own experts, and the parties agree not to go to court and to try and resolve everything. And so it's similar to mediation in that the idea is to come to an agreement, but you don't have an independent third party. You have your lawyers there as your advocates. I think, again, anything that's more amicable is always a great option, and that's the benefit of that. The negative is that if you do end up needing to go to court, you have to go and get a whole new lawyer and start, you know, that lawyer's gonna have to review everything and you're starting fresh. So that would be the negative. And then with just like lawyers like myself, who do everything, you know, I think the benefit of that is that you have all options available to you. And I mean, I would feel that, like, unfortunately, because like in so many things, because there's a few bad apples, I feel like a lot of us get branded with this idea that all we want to do is run up people's legal fees and fight. And I mean, there might be, you know, a small number of family law lawyers who fit that description. And I'm not going to say that there aren't, but most of us are not like that. I mean, when someone comes through my door, I'm very solution focused and want to try and do what's best for them. And sometimes that does mean going to court, unfortunately. And so I think it's, to me, I think it's just good to be able to know your situation and figure out what option makes the most sense.
Yeah, yeah, like really be clear for sure. Thank you. I know we were gonna start mediation, and I was like, no, there's no way. So,
Yeah.
but it is good to have that option for sure, as you said, when things are a little more amicable.
Yeah.
Um,
One thing that
so
happens that I've seen happen that I think is unfortunate is that, like, sometimes I'll have a client come to me and we want to try and do it amicably, so we get involved in the letter writing. And unfortunately, sometimes you can spend many months writing letters back and forth and nothing really happens. And and then meanwhile the client's again running up legal fees. And so unfortunately, I hate to say, like, sometimes it's better to start with court because you can always back away from it, but it gets timelines on things and it can make something happen faster. And that's where the experience of the lawyer comes in. But the last thing you want is to have a letter writing campaign for 6 months, and you've paid $5,000 or $10,000 in legal fees and nothing has even really happened yet.
yeah, I like that strategy. I think that's actually perfect. Starting with the attitude that you're going to court to get everything sorted, like, and then if things become amicable and they back off, then you have those other options. That's the best strategy. I wish you had been around 20 years ago for me, or 12 years ago, actually. Okay, so what do you do when you're in a common law relationship?
Well, a lot of people in common law relationships don't understand that, at least in Ontario, I can't, I think it's different in different parts of the world. They might not necessarily have the same rights as someone who is married. And so it's very important that whatever jurisdiction you're in, if you are in a common law relationship, that you find out that information. Because, here in Ontario, if you're in a common relationship, you don't have property rights. So if you split up, title is what rules the day. So if the home is in your spouse's name, then the home is theirs unless you can prove that you somehow contributed to it, either through raising children or through renovating it. And there's ways of doing that, but then the onus is going to be on you. Whereas if you were married, you would naturally have a certain entitlement there. And same with other property. Like if you're married, your partner's pension, their RSPs, their other investments, like all of those things you potentially have a claim on. But if you're common law here in Ontario, you don't have any claim on those sorts of things unless, again, you can establish that you somehow contributed to those in a way that benefited your partner. So it's, I've seen people who've lived with someone for a very long time and they, only to find out that, my God, like coming out of this relationship, I thought we had all this stuff and I don't have hardly anything. And it can be really devastating. So it's really important people understand that.
Yeah, that's great advice. And yeah, definitely. Before you even get involved, right? At this point, figure it out and marry the guy or girl and just, try to get title or whatever.
Yeah, because if you're home raising children or something, like you want to, they're benefiting from you doing that. So I mean, you could always get like a cohabitation agreement or marriage. Like I'm a big proponent of those sorts of things, and not because they give me a way to get make more money. It's just that I think that in this day and age, with so many relationships not lasting, and with second marriages and third marriages and things like that, it's a business decision. And I think having those sorts of things laid out in advance when you're in an amicable stage is a good way of dealing with it.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into my next question. How do you protect yourself and your assets for future relationships? So say you've been divorced a couple of times, you've been through the ringer. I mean, do you do a prenup? How do you protect yourself so that your assets are safe?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I'm a big proponent of prenups and or marriage contracts. If you get married and you don't have something, you can always get it while you're still married, or cohabitation agreement if you're living common law. Because yes, it's not romantic, but you know what? It's an important thing, and you need to look at your relationship is not just all, you know, love and emotions. There is a business element to it. You're dealing with money in a relationship. And so it makes perfect sense to also approach it, you know, from a non-emotional business head. And just because someone asks you to sign a marriage contract or a prenup, it doesn't mean they don't love you. It really does not mean that at all. And you know, and so people shouldn't equate it that it's somehow, you know, oh, he doesn't love me or she doesn't love me, and, you know, all of that, because it doesn't mean that. And particularly, you know, as they say with second marriages and whatnot, people have children and they have children from a prior relationship, and we all want to protect our children on some level. And so I think it's very reasonable for people to want to, you know, make sure they've got some protection in place for their children, and, you know, then the other partner. I think where you want to, where sometimes it can be telling is if your partner is asking you to sign something that basically completely, you know, annihilates you. Like if you're coming into the relationship with nothing financially, and you're going to have this lovely lifestyle because of the relationship, and this person expects you to walk out with the shirt on your back if it doesn't work out. I mean, I think that's showing a side of them that you may want to think about a little bit, because it's so one-sided and not even-handed. But otherwise, if there's some fairness in it, I don't think it should be interpreted as a negative on how the person feels about you.
Yeah, I agree. And really looking back, I wish I had some sort of an agreement. Although at the end of the day, I was married and I had, you know, that protection. But there are certain assets that, you know, got mixed into the fold that shouldn't have, right? And unfortunately, these things happen. But
Well, it's funny because in order to get like a separation agreement or divorce, usually people have to get independent legal advice. And I always think to get married, it should almost become a requirement that before you get married, both parties have to get independent legal advice, because then they can understand, you know, how to protect themselves, what they're walking into, what the consequences would be. I think that would be really helpful for people.
I think that's brilliant, Leanne. I really do. I really think that's brilliant, because we go in love struck, we're dumbfounded, and we're in, you know, sparkly romance land, not thinking about anything, and we say yes to everything. And I mean, it goes on both sides, clearly. But you know, having someone to advocate, okay, so wait a minute, are they in debt? You know, like, do they have a lot of debt? Let's have a look at that, because you're going to assume that debt if you get married, right?
Yeah.
And things like that. I mean, that would be brilliant. I know you're super busy already. That's perfect. So, okay, all amazing advice for women who are in the process of, you know, separation, divorce, and onward. What is there anything else that, just from a female point of view, you would like to give women as advice, just from being from the feminine?
I mean, I think that it's important that women are financially empowered, because, you know, even in 2020, a lot of women are not. They rely on their husbands or, you know, financially for support, or that, you know, because often women, you know, still are the child rearers in a lot of cases. And a lot of women don't pay attention to the inflows and outflows of money in the home, you know, what the expenses are, where's the money going. And I think that whether you work outside the home or you choose to be home, it's really important that you be on top of all of that stuff and look at it as a shared responsibility, because financial empowerment is so important in our society. You know, you don't want to end up being 50, 60, 70 years old with nothing, you know, after years of being in a relationship that, you know, you thought things were different. And so that even touches on what you were mentioning, debt. Like, I've had clients where they didn't know that their husband had all this massive debt, like to Canada Revenue or to, you know, whoever. And that's why it's really important that throughout your relationship, you be on top of all of that type of stuff.
Yes, just amazing advice. Okay, so we have to make sure that there's no debt. We have to have money conversations before we get married. We have to protect ourselves, because you're right, this really is a business agreement. And in fact, one of my lawyers really opened my eyes, because I just, you know, I had no awareness of what business, what are you talking about? And she said, the reason why we have marriage, it's a business contract.
Yeah.
It's a property arrangement. I'm like, you're absolutely right. I didn't even think of it like that.
Yeah.
So really coming from that point of view of this is a business deal.
It is, and people need to approach it more that way. And same with their divorce. I always say you need to approach it as it's like it's a business deal. Try and take the emotion out. You know, it's funny. I had an interesting conversation with a client a couple weeks ago because she was going on about how she wanted to get what she wanted him to get what he deserves, and she wants to get what she deserves. And I'm like, wait a minute, like take deserve right out of the equation because we're dealing with legal issues. No one may get what they just, we can't, that's not what the result is going to be. It's what the law says and what, you know, how we negotiate and all of that. But deserve has nothing to do with it. People getting, you know, you could be a horrible spouse. That spouse may not get what they deserve maybe in life, if you believe in karma and that sort of thing. Let karma get, you know, kick in and make them get what they deserve. But the legal system is not going to do that.
Absolutely. That is sage advice for sure. Keeping the emotions out of it. And I know I was told that and I kind of went, okay. And I dealt with my emotions separately. Like you've really got to do your work separate from the whole process of divorce. You need to get your therapist on speed dial. You need to have, you know, your health and wellness taken care of because you're going through a traumatic period, right?
Right, coaches, like that's where people like yourself are so, you know, valuable because you can help clients deal with that, all that emotional stuff at probably a less expensive fee than I would. And you know, you've got more training in that area to do that. So you're the right person.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You really need to bring in all of your resources during this process.
Yeah,
This has
sure.
been amazing. I can't tell you how, how important this information is and how much I appreciate you being here telling us all of this stuff because most of the time we don't get the full story. You know, we have to, you know, everything you told me in this interview, I had to speak to several lawyers to get the true answers. So I'm so grateful that you're here talking to us today, Leanne. And now, for anybody who is interested and in Toronto or in Canada even, in reaching out and getting more information from you, perhaps working with you, where can we find you?
Well, sorry, I was gonna say my main place is probably my website. There's my firm website, but I also have a personal one, which is www.leannetownsend.ca, and that has all my contact information for everything. So that's the best place to go.
Awesome. And of course, I will be posting that information for anybody who also wants that information. Leanne, thank you so much for being here today. All the best for the rest of the holidays for you or whatever left of summer or whatever. Thank you so much, Leanne.